Every year, thousands of experts evaluate the status of animal, plant, algae, and fungi species around the world. Using a common language of assessment, they categorize each species' risk of extinction on the IUCN Red List. The Red List provides a barometer of life. And every year, the outlook gets worse. More than 31,000 species are currently threatened with extinction. Most because of human action. But human action can also reverse the Red List trend. So conservationists, governments, and communities around the world are joining forces, activating tried and tested IUCN tools in a coordinated effort to assess, plan, and act for wildlife. Together, we can save species from extinction. Together, we can win the fight for our planet's future. Together, we can reverse the red.
Good afternoon, evening, good morning. Welcome everyone joining us from right around the world. I'm Dr. Jenny Gray. I'm the CEO of Zoos Victoria, and it's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all this evening. I'm joining you from Melbourne, Australia, from the land of the Wurundjeri people, land that has been cared for by traditional owners for thousands of years. And I recognize the role of First Nation people around the world in caring for country. Reverse the Red is an idea. It's a collaboration. It's a group of people coming together asking a really simple question. What can we do to make a difference to the outcome for species right around the planet? What can we do to have animals, nature, plants do better than it's doing at the moment? And tonight we're asking a different question. We're saying, how can we engage 50% of the population? How do we engage the women in joining a movement to look after wildlife? We are celebrating women and their contribution to conservation. And our panel are some of the world's leading women conservationists who are committed to working tirelessly to empower and advance women in conservation. And I'm really delighted they're all joining me tonight. I also am delighted that we have live interpretation available in Spanish, with thanks to the National Zoo of Chile and the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Behind the scenes are Martin and Andrea, who will be helping us by translating what we're talking about into Spanish, and we're very grateful. Thank you. For those of you who want to hear tonight's talk in a different language, or in Spanish, please click on the bottom where the interpretation button is and choose the Spanish channel. And the same information is available in both English and Spanish in the chat if you just missed that. I also know that there's people right around the world joining, and I know you all know how to do this because I can see you doing it already in chat. So as I introduce the panel, please go ahead and tell us where you are and where you're joining from. And just as we glance through the chat, we're all nodding because we are seeing people coming from right around the world. So it's my great pleasure to introduce the panel to you two. Joining us from India, we're joined by Dr. Purnima Devi Barman, a wildlife biologist and founder of the Hargila Army. Welcome, Purnima.
Thank you.
From Vietnam, Tran Nguyen, who Dr. Tran is a wildlife conservation scientist and founder and executive director of WildAct. Welcome, Tran. And from Canada, Dr. Amanda Vincent, director and co-founder of Project Seahorse, professor of the Institute for Ocean and Fishery at the University of British Columbia, the chair of the IUCN SSC Seahorse Pipefish Seadragon Specialist Group, and the IUCN SSC Marine Conservation Committee. Welcome, Amanda. So welcome. It is great to have you joining the conversation in the chat as well. Ask questions if you have them as you're going. It's not often you're going to get this incredible panel here to answer the questions you have. I'm going to be asking questions to the panel, but I will find time as well to answer some of the questions that come up in the chat. And so to kick us off, I only gave you a very short introduction. I'm going to ask the wonderful panelists to tell you just a little bit more about themselves and the work they're doing. And Purnima, I'm going to ask you to kick us off. Tell us a little bit about the Army and the empowerment of women and how that features in the work you're doing.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Jenny, for your introduction and for all your support. And I'm so honored to be here. And I can see many people joining from all over the world. It's really inspiring. Thank you so much. And yeah, and namaskar from Assam. And I'm from Assam, from India. And at first, I'd like to mention that I work for a bird called Hargila locally, and it is greater adjutant storks. And I work for an NGO called Aranyak in Assam. And now I would like to tell something about our Hargila army. And before I describe or before I share about our Hargila army journey, so I'd like to show you a bird. It is in front of me now. This is the bird. This is the cute bird, Hargila bird. So yeah, it is a scavenger bird and it is Hargila. Hargila is a local name and itself means bone swallowers. And you can see the Hargila bird made by our Hargila army. So in our traditional Assamese gamusa, which is a scarf. So this is the Hargila bird. So now about our Hargila army. So Hargila army is a all-women army group, all-women team who are from villages, from the rural areas from Assam, and who are now protecting the birds, and they are the voice of this bird. So Hargila army for Hargila. So I would like to mention that when I started my work, this bird, because they are scavenger birds and they had a very bad reputation and it was so stressful. The bird was always treated as pest or messy bird or bad omen or a disease carrier. And it was very difficult at that time when I was working for this bird and when I was struggling. But throughout my journey, spontaneously and suddenly, we formed a all-women army team called Hargila Army. And it is incredible. All our rural women converted into conservationists. All our homemakers converted into conservationists. So yeah, so our Hargila army are now leaders, and our Hargila army has proved that everyone can be conservationist. So for being a conservationist, we don't need to have a special degree or diploma. Everyone can protect the birds, everyone can protect the biodiversity which is in our backyard. So actually Hargila birds goes or select the trees which are in our backyard in the villages, which like the trees are the property of the people. So this way Hargila birds miss government protection. All the trees where they select for breeding, they are owned by communities. And and our Hargila army now protecting the trees, protecting the birds, protecting the wetlands, and we want to say that let's start our conservation work from our home, from our backyard. So this is the message from Hargila Army, and I am very proud to mention that through our Hargila Army, we have converted the bird into a cultural icon. Now everyone have accepted the bird, and yeah, so I'd like to mention more about our Hargila Army, and we have about more than 10,000 women who have pledged to be Hargila Army, and if you come to our village daily basis, actively we have 400 women who are daily conservation leaders, and with these 400 women we keep moving from one village to another village, and then the women from the villages, they come and take place, and this way we have our Hargila Army movement. And now from a small band of women, now it's our social movement. It's a huge social movement, and so our women, they are protecting the birds, they are rescuing the birds, they are saving this bird and converted it into a cultural icon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I can just see from the comments, everyone is really inspired. You said a couple of things that were just so true, that everyone can be a conservationist. And that's just such a great message. Tran, let's go to you and share a little bit about the work of WildAct and the engagement of women in WildAct.
Thank you, Dr. Jenny. I would like to say to Dr. Panima that her presentation, her introductions about the work she was doing is really inspiring. So for me, my name is Trang. I come from Vietnam. I'm a Vietnamese wildlife conservationist. And I guess just like many other wildlife conservation scientists that are joining us today, you probably never think that your normal daily work would be conserving, researching, and practice wildlife conservations. I myself, I have never thought that I would involve in the gender issue, gender equality, in order to promote and to make our conservation work more effective. My organization, WildAct, we have 3 pilot programs at the moment. And just like many other organizations, we mostly, at the beginning, we mostly focus on working to put boots on the ground. We do researching in the forest, we're supporting the rangers and the local communities, removing snake trap and patrolling and so and so. And our second program is to build the Vietnamese national capacities, try to have more young conservationists to do work. And we have some amazing, brilliant participants, and many of them are female students, with the best of all. But then when we were working with them and when we're supporting them and engaging them to work with local organizations in Vietnam, one of our most excellent students, she got a full-time job pretty much immediately after graduating from our course. And she had her first ever long field work in the forest. She was super excited. I remember she was calling me and said, "Oh, hey, I'm working with this organization now. I'm gonna go field work next week. Wish me luck." But she contacted me a few weeks afterward, and she was really upset. She was telling me that she was sexual assault by some of the local people in the national parks, and her line manager was there, but he didn't provide her any support. She was then told by some of the other colleagues in the office after she reporting the case, and they were saying, "Oh, you're a woman, you go to the forest, what do you expect?" And she was so confused, so hurt, and so afraid. And she was telling me that she's probably gonna quit conservation completely, or maybe that she will only do less work. And that when I realized that as a person myself and as an organization, we cannot encourage people, especially young women, to participate in conservation if our sector is not safe enough for women. So we started to do this survey, and this is the first ever survey into sexual harassment in wildlife conservation in Vietnam. And the result was really alarming. We conducted this survey for 2 months, and we have over 100 people participate who work in Vietnam, who are Vietnamese and also foreigners working in Vietnam. And the results showing that 5 in every 6 participants experience sexual harassment in some form. 3 out of 8 people have been harassed but did not reporting the case to their organizations. And 1 in every 10 respondents say that they either witnessed sexual assault or experienced sexual assault. So it's super, super urgent, and it's something that needs to be addressed in at least in Vietnam right now. And that's when we created a completely new program, and our third pilot programs at WildAct called Empowering Women in Conservation. We was very fortunate to get supported by the US Rights Challenge with funding and expertise from them. And we're aiming to make environments and conservation work a safer, more inclusive, and more effective for women, and also for conservation effort. At the moment, we are working with national parks, local NGO, international NGO, and try to inspire and encouraging them to have a safeguarding policies and supporting people to create a better world of work for women. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trang. What a staggering statistic, and one we probably all feel quite strongly about. Dr. Amanda, tough 2 ladies to follow, but I know you've got some great stories for us as well. Please share a little bit with us about the work that you're doing with the oceans.
Yeah, I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm zooming in from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people, our First Nations in Canada, some of our many First Nations. I think that Purnima and Trang, between them, have captured two of the themes we're going to have to discuss, that women are incredibly strong and that women are going to need some pretty significant changes to allow us to demonstrate that strength in conservation and in everything else. And those changes are not the responsibility of women alone. And that's got to be a theme coming out of this. So I'm really so proud and pleased that you came up with those wonderful themes right away. My team is called Project Seahorse, and we work on male pregnancy because we work on seahorses in the ocean. So that's perhaps something that resonates with many women on this call. We tend to look at the world as a bit of an onion. So although I started by working on seahorses, you can't do much for seahorses unless you also look after their habitats and communities and ecosystems in the ocean. And that's your first layer of an onion, if you will. But of course, those communities in the ocean are only going to thrive if the people who interact with them have choices, so that they have livelihood options and their children are in school and they have good community support. So working with fishers and working with coastal developers and working with miners and so on and their families is vital. Of course, they can only thrive in a socioeconomic situation where there's good governance and there's law and order and there's opportunities. So we start to move out through the layers of governance. Eventually, every country and every region depends on good global interactions, and we're feeling the repercussions of trouble right now. So that is really necessary to work out at the UN level, IUCN level. And then ultimately it comes down to the human behaviors of greed and altruism and self-discipline and self-indulgence. And I think those themes play out in how women can be effective in conservation as well. So my team links research and management and policy to try to get a constant feedback loop. We work in countries all over the world, and countries that actually I'm most fond of include India and Vietnam, where we have lots of ties and relationships. Our team is mostly women. We've done quite a lot of work on women gender in fisheries, recognizing the role of women in fishing, which is overlooked but critically important if we're to get it right for the ocean. I'm very concerned about how women can be empowered, because a lot of the best conservation initiatives at all scales are led by women. But we're doing it despite the circumstances, and this has to get a little bit easier. So I'm really happy to join this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. And you really have, I'm going to start with you as we just start exploring some of these clearly three very accomplished women. But you've been attracted into conservation, and I'm really intrigued to start the discussion with the three of you of what attracted you to working in conservation. Was it, many of us stayed up late at night watching Dr. Jane Goodall pioneering for women, but perhaps to share with us what inspired you and what attributes do you think really attracted you to working in conservation? And Amanda, I'll start with you this time.
Passionate commitment to the ocean. Can't even explain it. Just a delight and warmth and excitement when I'm near the ocean, but far better when I'm in the ocean. So most people have no sense of the ocean. If everybody on this call closed their eyes and pictured the ocean, most of you would imagine the beach or the coastline. And yet there's this magical world there. 99% of our living space on Earth is in the ocean, 99%. And yet the oceans are an afterthought in a great many conversations that tend to focus on our terrestrial concerns, but our human well-being depends intrinsically on the ocean. So can't even trigger for you when it happened. Just know that passionately committed to that part of our wonderful planet.
And Purnima, what attracted you into conservation?
Yeah, actually, I was fascinated by nature since my childhood. But I come from a village, but I never saw a TV. Also, when I was a child, I didn't know anything about nature conservation. But my grandma, I was a very restless child, and my grandma had a solution for me. So she took me to her paddy fields, and she connected me with nature. And she almost all the time she asked me to count birds, sing for the birds, and I think there was a a deep connection, but I did never realize. And at that time, I saw my friends Hargila birds also at that time, or many other birds. But during my studies in my masters, I came in connection with my professors, especially two professors who kept telling about the role of women or role of us, on nature. And at that time, I became obsessed. I wanted to do my PhD on Hargila birds because everyone was talking about mega species like rhinos, tigers, and people didn't speak about species like Hargila or lesser known species. So I wanted to do my PhD, and trust me, I thought, or it was my belief that conservation means research or something like that. I never knew beyond that. I was very desperate. And then after my master's, I got married, and I had my twin girls, two babies, they were 2.5 years old. And I was writing my synopsis, and I was managing time budgeting, and I was preparing my synopsis. But one day, and I want to mention that again, coming to my daughters, yes, they became my everything, and I was blessed with my motherhood, and then my PhD was my dream. But one day I got a call from a villager, and my life has changed. I went there, and I saw a man cutting down a huge nesting tree, which was, we call it as locally as kadam tree, which was a huge nesting tree, and which was hosting 9 nests, and 9 baby birds fell down. And when I was there, I was shocked to see the baby birds. A few birds died, a few baby birds died, and a few birds were still alive. And I started talking to the person, telling him that this bird is so important, and this is the breeding season. And then I never realized that, that the person was so angry on me. He was reacting on me, and his neighbors, they joined, and they all started surrounding me and started mocking at me. And I think as I was a mother, I got deeply pained to see the birds. And that day I realized that research would not be enough. We have to change the mindset of people. Those people started telling that this bird is a bad omen, and it's a disease carrier, and you came here to lecture on us to save this bird. Why don't you take this with you? So that day I realized that the power of people, that we have to bring them as forefront leaders, because they can be the saviors, because the birds live with them. So that day I realized about conservation, and I got a mission to live my life. And from that day, actually, I got attracted to conservation, and I learned from all my communities what is conservation by interacting with them. And more than that, I realized the power of people to protect a species. So for me, conservation is all about people and changing their mindset and building ownership. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Purnima. And you really have identified so well the people that inspired you. Dr. Tran, and I've had a question from the interpreters. They've asked us to speak a little slower, so I'm trying to speak slowly. Are there people, what attracted you into conservation? We've heard such great stories.
Yeah, so my story, I was born and raised in Vietnam, and in the early 90s in Vietnam, I was born in 1990, and around that time, the government still allow people to keep bears for bear by family. And it's very unfortunate that one of my neighbors were keeping bears. I was very small, I was only 6 or 7 at the time. And we were, as children, we're super excited. We say we want to see bears. We heard that the neighbor had bears. We want to see bears, but they always hide the bear away. They have a big rain cover and they put it on top of the cage, so we never see the bears. Would make us more curious. And then one day I got home really late with my friends, and we heard people talk about bears. We heard some strange noise. We heard some gruntings. We smelled this really distinct smell from bears. And so we were tiptoeing, and we kind of like tried to peer in through the gate. And that's the first time in my life I ever saw a bear. It was later on, now that I know, that was an Asiatic black bear, and she was lying with her back on the ground, and she would knock out. And we saw that one of these men, they were having a really big needle, and he just stabbed the bear with the needles. And at that moment, the bear cat like making some noises and she was shaking and I was totally terrified and we were screaming our head off and we ran away. And what we saw really stuck in my head. I did not know what conservation is. I didn't even know there's a carrier called wildlife conservation. I just want to do anything I can to help the bears and help other wild animals like the bears. And so I asked our doctor, I had my parents, I have a teacher, and they said, oh, you want to be a ranger? I said, no, not really. Oh, you want to be a zookeeper? I said, no, I don't like zoo. Not like, you know, the handle zoos is really horrible at the time. The welfare is terrible. They keep them in horrible, small concrete and metal bar. The animal was having really strong abnormal behavior. So I did not want to work there. And I said, no, I don't want to work in handle zoo. I don't like handle zoo. And then I watched documentary from Devi Attenborough's. I learned that there's a carrier called wildlife conservation where you can go and see animals and you can study about them, you can save them. And my role model at the time, I also remember that I watched a documentary called Gorilla in the Mix. And I learned about Diane Foxey, and I found her story was very inspiring, her determination, the way she overcome her hardship. And then I learned about Dr. Jane Goodall's, and they are all role models for me.
Thank you. And so again, just turning to our audience, if you have any questions, now's a good time to drop them in, because after the next round of questions, I will pick up a couple of the questions out of the audience. But as women in conservation, and Dr. Tran, you mentioned the survey you did and some of the findings you had. Have you found some unique challenges as a woman that you've encountered in conservation? But equally, what would you advise women entering into the field? There may be young women out there or mid-career women looking for a change. Do you have any advice for them on the skills and opportunities that they should consider, and the skills that you've really, or the opportunities you've just grabbed as you had that opportunity?
Thank you for the questions. Well, definitely some of the biggest obstacles that we have overcome and we are still facing in Vietnam at the moment, especially with me, my organization, or other young women in conservation, that Vietnam is still very much, we have this, like, the cultural social norm in Vietnam is very strong. They respect older men. They expect men more than women. There are a lot of time when I would go into the field work with my colleagues, and the director of the national parks, or the people who are our working partners, they would not even look at me. They refused to shake my hand because I was young, because I'm young and I'm a woman. They would talk to my male colleagues who could, and he might not necessarily have the skills or the experience as much as I do, but they refuse to talk to me. And it made me think that a lot of time, I think it'd be easier if I was an older male conservationist. But I see that young female also, conservationists also have advantage as well. Especially now there are so many programs, especially made and created for women in conservation. There are women's for leadership conservation course for women. There are women's fellowships, and there are so many things that we can learn and we can improve. And I would encourage anyone to sign up for that, for those courses, to learn more about the leadership skill, because I think it's super important, whether you are male or female.
Amanda, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, there are many, many challenges to being a woman in this field. Some of them are, of course, shared with the difficulties of being of a particular race in the field, or having a disability in the field, or being of a particular ethnicity. So like a lot of the issues we go through, and all of us have been through, of aggressions and dismissiveness and disrespect and so on, some of them are women and some of them are just, if you're not mainstream white academic male, you're going to get them. So we have to be mindful that there's a whole bunch of people who share these concerns with women, and that they're part of the allies. I think there are some distinctive challenges for women. And, you know, absolutely, already Trang's referred to some of them about safety, and I want to come back to that at some point. But I think there are also the real biological challenges that nobody wants to talk about. So pregnancy and breastfeeding, and I've also got children. It's, you know, been very tricky. I nearly miscarried in the field and get, you know, very stressed by that memory. So pregnancy and breastfeeding, but then also the simple ones of how to deal with menstrual periods in the field. And, I remember a gripping story of a young Indian woman who came up to me so excited about a fantastic research opportunity she had. She could join this work in ocean conservation, and it was her dream job, and she wanted it with all her heart. But she quietly asked me, how was she going to deal with her periods if she was actually on a boat at sea? And those issues are very real. We've got to talk about how to respect the fact that a quarter of women at any time are dealing with the challenges of a menstrual period. Also, how to pee in the field. If you're on a boat and men just stand and pee over the side, women, these are real limitations, and we mustn't ignore them. We need to have an open conversation about how to make the environment more welcoming for women as we just go about our biological lives. So I want to recognize those, as well as the undoubted challenges along the lines that Trang has already mentioned. There are many moments when it's been scary. I've had moments in the field where I was terrified, and there have been some very bad things happen. Some of those might have happened to minority peoples or might have happened to disabled people, but some of them were uniquely women for sure. However, I think that the other thing is just how to deal with the constant microaggressions, the constant low-level dismissiveness that you don't even know how to tackle it because it's just so pervasive, where you're in some way disrespected along the lines that Trang was mentioning, and I'm sure Purnima will share. So we've got some genuine female-only challenges, and we have challenges as well that are shared with other groups of people, and together I think we've got to tackle this.
Purnima, I'm going to bring you in, and Amanda referenced. What are you thinking, and perhaps can share some of your experiences?
Yeah, so it was great to hear from Dr. Amanda and Dr. Trang, and I echo them. So women have to face so many challenges, and basically I'm being from Assam, and in our society, it's really, I myself face a lot of gender barriers, and before that I would like to mention about being a woman, and as I have mentioned that I was a mother, so a woman has to balance everything, work, and then it was such a huge task, and balancing and then taking care of my babies, and then my work with people. I was dealing with more than 10,000 families, and then Hargila bird. And when I went to the village and when I was representing the Hargila bird, can you believe me, people, because of their mindset, people put their hands on their nose and just started telling me about that. Just like that, I was smelling the birds, like they wanted to tell that the Hargila bird was smelling very bad. So it was very stressful to change the mindset, to work, then again balancing everything. But yeah, then I learned a lot and enhanced my leadership skill and how to manage everything. And that message I want to give all to enhance the leadership, as Dr. Trang said. And then coming to the gender barriers. So yeah, it was, I had to face a lot, and during my initial days when I was working for the species, so yeah, I had to prove myself, and some people or some colleagues even commented that my job is to give birth, and I was very useless or something like that. So I had to prove myself a lot, and then it became a restless movement, and I realized that rather than fighting with those mindset, so I have to fight with myself and improve myself, and change the mindset of people about the birds. The focus I learned, and what message I want to give for my fellow conservationists, women conservationists, is to be consistent in your mission. Be consistent, be persistent, and focus, and try to enhance your leadership, and especially be very creative and innovative, and the skills we have to learn working with government stakeholders, like public relations skills, then skills to manage the conflict, so working with people, so connecting, and sometimes also convincing also, but more than that convincing, yes, connecting with people. So these are the skills that I request all my fellow conservationist women to develop. Thank you.
Thank you. looking at some of the questions, there's one about how can women support other women? And I wonder which one of you would like to answer that one. Dr. Purnima, I see, let's let you go. Can women, I feel like I'm asking exactly the right person, how women can support other women.
Yeah, so in our Hargila army, so this is a strong message from our Hargila army, how we can support each others, and when we are united, we become so strong. And coming again to my Hargila army, I'm so happy now that that our women are the leaders. Earlier, when when I was working with them, they never came to my meetings. You know, they never came to my meetings. They always rejected. They told that they had to cook for their children, for their husband. So they were basically dealing with the household chores. And now when after this journey, and when our Hargila army became so powerful, I'm very proud to mention that when a baby bird fall down, so our men in the locality, they rush to a Hargila army. Where is Hargila army? So this way our women become leaders, and then they realize the power of uniting, like how, this is because of we all are united. This is not about a one person's work. This is the teamwork. So yeah, and I request all the policymakers and all the conservationists to involve more and more women, to give them opportunity to achieve our conservation goals, because it's very important to involve women in our conservation agenda and decision making. So that is my message. Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope you've seen in the chat, Dr. Amanda, when you were speaking, there was a lot of applause, and there's a few questions there from a couple of women just saying, as you did, how do we start those conversations around the biological needs and really just help strengthen each other when we are deployed into the field?
Yeah, not watching the chat because I'm so busy listening. I think the first thing is we just need to dare to speak the words. I'm a Western woman based in a country where such conversations might be slightly easier than other countries, but I'll be honest, every time I have to say the word menstrual period, in a mixed company, I still feel uncomfortable. But at the same time, it's absolutely vital that we hold those conversations and talk openly and honestly about not how the challenge limits us. I mean, this is a proud thing, but how we need respect and support and engagement to address those challenges. And I've found that if we have open conversations, men are often quite willing to hear and engage and talk about it, but just they've never had the opportunity to actually plunge into these concerns without themselves feeling embarrassed and somehow uncomfortable. So I think if we can open up the conversations and try to do it with as much confidence as possible, it should enable more men to join these conversations. And there are a huge number of men out there who would be significant allies and accomplices if we just offer that opportunity. So I think that's the starting point, is be open and honest about it. Not always comfortable, for sure. And that's where your question about women supporting women, if more of us start talking about it and embrace each other on that, then that's absolutely going to help. I just wanted to go back slightly to the issue of what women should be how women can improve their be more empowered in conservation. And I really wanted to echo a little bit of this issue of training and leadership, but I wanted to add a little bit more, which is training in mediation and conflict resolution, and training in ways to have difficult conversations and bring people in and support people. A large part of this is going to come down to women regarding every other woman as an ally, but also trying desperately to ensure that men are allies as much as possible.
Thank you. And so powerful, and definitely hearing that resonating with the audience. Dr. Tran, one of the questions we're having is, how do we, listening to your story just clearly rang a bell, but it talks about women being at risk, and how we wouldn't send you into a dangerous place without the right tools and equipment. How do we equip women if we know there's risks ahead, and so that they can deal clearly with them? Have you got some thoughts on that, Dr. Trang?
So that is exactly what my organization is doing in Vietnam at the moment. We trying to work with other organizations, and it's crazy when we were doing our survey, we also talked to all of these organizations working in Vietnam and see how many of them have a safeguarding policy. It's super important because when the policy is there, people can use it as a guideline, and it can also force people to think of what can we do to preventing it? How are we going to respond to it? And that's super important. And it's not only the organization that have these safeguarding policies, but the partner of that organization also have to think of what they allow their staff to do, the behavior they allow to express when they are working with you. At the moment that we are trying to advocate for other organizations also have, so when we go into the field, we normally have to fill in this risk assessment form. Why don't we do a similar thing to have a risk assessment form for safety, not for women, but also for men? And once we have that done, we can see all of these risks that there are. How are we going to respond to that? Who are the person to contact? If you are in the middle of the forest, there's no internet, there's no one there. If the attacker are from the local, what can you do? Who in the team can you talk to? If the attackers are a senior officer who working with you, what can you do? Who in the team can support you and what we can do? And we're also providing training to our staff as well as other conservation staff at the moment as well, and how to respond to situations. If the situation is verbal harassment, what the best way to respond to it? If it becomes physical, if it becomes assault, what can you do? And we're trying to providing tools as well as some advice and contacts from external organizations that work specifically in gender equalities and assault to supporting the survival. So we're trying to equip them as much as we can.
Wow, thank you. Moving on to another question, just about the contribution of women and how we can really acknowledge and scale it up. And Dr. Purnima, you talked so well about, so much conservation happens at a local level, and yet we see big NGOs and everyone seems to want to play at the big government work, whereas actually we're going to save many, many species at a local level. And how do we scale up this contribution? You obviously have the answer, you've got it up to 10,000 women taking part. But how would you suggest other people go about scaling up, getting that real momentum?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question again. So now we are replicating our work, or we are expanding our work to other districts in Assam, and I think I think our Hargila army is a conservation model, and this is all because of their efforts, and it's a conservation model, and I think this kind of works can be replicated in other projects, in other species. Basically, basically to work on the lesser known species, and they can be also our cultural icons. They can be the pride factors of our communities, but we have to give efforts on that. And I think this kind of works, I don't tell that exactly the work we are doing could be replicated. So this kind of, this kind of initiative can be taken by other conservationists or policymakers. Basically, the message is to involve more and more rural women, and this makes a difference because a woman can change the society. She has the power to change the society. So, and when she has the power to change the society, so she can convert a species to a cultural icon. She can convert a bad woman to a cultural icon or pride symbol. So this is my message. And for example, we every year we celebrate Hargila baby shower. Like baby shower is our movement now, and the Hargila baby shower exactly like the way we celebrate for our Assamese expecting mothers. So when we had a pregnant woman, Assamese expecting mother, so we had some rituals, and we celebrate the same rituals for the birds. And this way our women, our communities could connect that Hargila bird is also like us, and we have to give respect when they are breeding. When they are in the breeding season, we can't cut the trees. So something like this. So this kind of message, I think these kind of activities we can definitely replicate, and we have to work more on the policy levels, basically to work on the unprotected area. Coming to the protected area, they already get lots of government protection, but unprotected area in the rural life, we have lots of species, lesser known species, and definitely we have to scale up and we have to work such activities. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tran, how are you thinking about how we can scale up the contribution of women?
I think it's super important to provide an opportunity for women to speak up and to get their voice heard, an opportunity where they can networking and they can talk to each other. Not because in Vietnam, especially when we go to conference, we go for government meeting, you would see the room is full of men, and there might be one or two women here and there. Or even if you go to the field, go to the local communities, the people are get invited to come over and give the decisions or talk about the plans, what is the next step, and often it's older men. And we really want to change that, and we want to encouraging women. So at the moment in Vietnam, what we are doing, we have created this network called WildAct Conservationists for a Better World of Work. And we invite men and women to join the groups, and we talk about all of these issues, not just men, women, but also people from the gender minority as well, and how are we going to work together to make things better. And we not only talk about the gender issues, but we also talk about conservation issues. What is the capacity that you need to be improved? What can we do for you? What kind of training are you looking forward to? And then we would also find partnering organizations that not only in Vietnam, but also in neighboring countries like Laos, Cambodia, Thailand. And they have so many similar stories with us. The problem with gender is a problem with lack of resource, lack of human resource as well, funding. And that's how we start working together. And I think that's how we can scale up not only in the northern part of Vietnam, the whole of Vietnam, and then not just Vietnam, but also the whole Southeast Asia. And I think it's super, super important for people to speak out about the safety working in conservation as well. We have been talking about doing field work in conservation. It's difficult for women, but there are also a lot of organizations nowadays involving in doing undercover investigations to combating the illegal wildlife trade. But many of them, they're not equipping their staff, neither men or women, on how to deal with urgent situation. What if your identity got revealed? Who do you have? Who is there to help you? Are there any local authorities that can be there to protect you? And all of that issue need to be talked about. When our organization starting our program on empowering women in conservation, I went and I met with so many directors and so many people from other organizations, government agency as well. And people just look at me that I'm a mad woman. Some of them said to me that you are imagining things. You spend too much times in foreign countries. There's no gender inequality here. There's no sexual harassment here. All of my staff are very happy. There's no such things. And then you have to be persistent. And I tried to like nudge them a bit. And then when we have our first workshop, I was so surprised that there was over 100 people sign up for it. There are people from other sectors asking us to join our workshop to learn about this, what is sexual harassment, how are we going to preventing it. And now after almost a year and a half running the programs, some of our closest partners are those that oppose to the idea the most. So I think that one of the reasons, I think Dr. Amanda also already mentioned it, is not being talked about enough. And we need to talk about it. We need to make people see the problems, understand the problem, how it's affecting our conservation work as well. It's not just about humanity issues, but also conservation efforts. And if they understand it, they will join hand with us.
Yeah, what a great insight as well, that the transparency, it's very easy to believe things don't exist until you're shown them, and possibly that's what's brought your converts along. Dr. Amanda, in terms of scaling up women's contribution, what do you think there?
Well, the first thing is I want to comment on both Trang and Purnima's wonderful thoughts. One thing to keep in mind, I've just read a commentary in a journal called Nature, where a researcher has shown empirically that the people who say that they have the fewest problems with discrimination, bias, or harassment are usually heading organizations with the most problems in sexual harassment and bias and prejudice. So that's something we really need to alert people to, that the more you protest, the more you probably have problems, and that needs to be addressed. So just responding to your comments, I think there are a couple of things that really matter. One is, I think, if we're going to scale up our efforts, a lot of it is dependent on relationships, actually building ties and connections and contacts with people and identifying people who can help make a difference. And that's where I think, you know, we can really look for women and other allies who might help us to expand and enhance our work. Some of this responsibility really has to come down to other people. So if you're not a woman, or you don't identify as a woman, but you feel like you'd like to be part of the solution, approach us in an overt, proactive way, saying, how can I help? You know, as women in the field, I know you have difficulties. What can I do to support? What is my role? How can I make a difference? Sometimes that difference is by saying no to invitations and no to opportunities, so that you allow women to actually have a voice and have a presence and have a visibility. So, you know, check your privilege and ask what more you can do in an active way, rather than assuming we'll come screaming for help. It's your job to reach out to us and enable things. I think that really matters. I think that donor agencies need to get serious about their funding. So one thing I would say is we should be able to bill for childcare. We should be able to ask for funds to enable us either to take children to the field or to arrange appropriate help, but somehow let's keep our voices loud and clear by accessing the resources that would enable the village women, of course, right through to the internationally profiled women, to actually contribute in a meaningful way all the time. I mean, you know, I'm pretty privileged, and I've many times had to say no because of childcare challenges. So this is something that I think is a familiar issue. And donor agencies could also provide better support for safety measures. You know, it's not safe for women to stay in the cheapest accommodation some of the time, or to take overnight buses. It's just not safe. You know, although I'm based in Canada, I've lived much of my life in the developing world, and whether it's Canada or elsewhere, it's not safe to travel in certain circumstances. So the budget has to go up a bit to keep us safer, and if necessary, to hire an assistant. And I absolutely hear Trang's comment about males assistants being spoken to over the woman who's actually leading the project. But, you know, we need assistance sometimes. So there are pragmatic funding issues that would make a difference. And then the final thing I'm going to say might sound a bit surprising, but if you're a woman and you want to influence things, offer to take the minutes, offer to do the documentation. People think it's a woman's role anyway, so they're very happy to give us the job of writing down what happened and keeping the minutes. And I can't tell you how many times I've been able to influence the course of action just by the way that I recorded the discussion and recorded the minutes and documented the action points. So sometimes you just want to play them at their own game, offer to do the minutes, and that way you'll control the narrative that comes out of any discussion or any meeting. You know, there's lots of ways we can be empowered, but oh my goodness, it's going to require a lot of men coming to us and saying, how can I be an ally? And we'll take advantage of that, I promise.
Thank you so much. Again, so much applause. What a great answers from all three of you. And reading through, just keeping an eye on what's coming through, many people sharing the experience, many people really reaching out and giving examples. One of the suggestions in the chat is, how do we share more success stories of women like we're doing today? How do we just make sure we're always recognizing the contributions of women? Unbelievably, most of the time is slipping by. This has been such a wonderful conversation. And so as we draw towards the end, in closing, I'm going to ask you one of my favorite questions. And that is, if you were all powerful, if I could flick a magic switch, and I would absolutely love to live in a world that any one of the three of you were running, what would you change to make a difference for securing a better future for wildlife, for people, for the planet? Dr. Amanda, I'm going to start with you. If you were all powerful, what would you be changing?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is ask that you please invite Purnima and Trang to talk first, because they're on the front lines in the mega diverse regions. And I think that their challenges are very real. And I'd love to hear what they see and see what they say and see what I can amplify there. So if you don't mind, I'd go last, please.
I'm happy to take that request. So Dr. Purnima, what would you change if you were all powerful?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Amanda. So, yeah, so a few things that definitely I would like to change. Yeah, first of all, habitat. So habitat like trees that, so the habitat should get justice. So I would like to change that first. So our habitat should get protection, and especially in the unprotected area that I have already mentioned. So then next step, maybe about empowering more and more women. So to give them a voice, and if I have that power, I want to bring more women by giving them more scholarship, more empowerment, more funding opportunities, more exposure. So yeah, so those kind of things I want to do. And finally, yes, I would like to bring a change by seeing a harmony between wildlife and people. So these are the changes that I want to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Purnima. Dr. Tran, what would you change?
I think it's very important to have a equality and equitable environment. And this is not only related to genders, but it's also between different people groups. So for example, in Vietnam, we have 54, 55 different group of ethnic minorities. And my ethnic, the King people are the most populated in the countries. And throughout my work, when I go to the field, I can see that there's so many places that these indigenous, the minority people are being pushed on the side. They are not recognized, their rights being violated, their land getting stolen. But they are the people that have the most knowledge, and they have the most harmony way of living with the forest. They protect things, they have ritual, they protect the habitat that they're living in, they protect the species, the trees, plant, everything. And I think it's super important that we can somehow empower not just women, but also the gender minorities, the people from the ethnic minorities, all of these people, and making people working together is so important, to make people work together and put aside the prejudice. I also do work in combating illegal wildlife trade. I go into Africa and I do undercover work, and there are so many times when I was there, people got so angry at me. They saw me as an Asian person, and they immediately think that you are the one that come over here to kill our rhinos. You come over here to steal our species, our land and things. And sometimes they assault it too much. Sometimes it get violence. And I just got so upset about it. I said, no, I'm not the bad person. Not all Asian people are bad. Not all Vietnamese people are bad. I'm here trying to help you to do the work. All of that kind of thing, I think it's the finger pointing is not helping anything. And we have to realize that we have to work together. It doesn't matter if you are a business person, if you are policy makers, if you are a teacher, we all can contribute to conservation. And I really wish that there would be one day where people are equal and we realize that we have to work together, not dividing, but work together.
Thank you, Dr. Tran. Dr. Amanda.
Everything that I just endorse everything Purnima and Trang said, and maybe add a little bit. I think we need to make everybody more accountable for the status of women. And so any evaluation of anybody's performance at any level should include, what have you done for equity, diversity, and inclusion? It should be a core metric for people's performance. And there are an awful lot of women in conservation. There are masses of us. I mean, the Hargila Army is a wonderful example, but all over the place, I get to work with fantastic women. But in the power structure in our world, it's still largely men. So the challenge is to change the reception in that power structure. And we need, obviously, to have more women as leaders of business, which we haven't talked much about, which drives conservation, or leaders of government, which again drives conservation, leaders of religion, which is super influential on how people interact with our world. And most of those big structures are led by men. So until we get a chance to plant women all over the place in those structures, as we strive for that, those men need to be held accountable by being asked to explain what they're doing to deal with equity, diversity, and inclusion on all scales, but of course, women among them. And my final comment is that, for all of us, I'm going to say we're not going to advance global conservation unless we take better account of the ocean. 99% of our world's living space is in the ocean. It regulates our well-being in every dimension. And most people never talk about it. And in ocean conservation, we still have a long way to go to create situations where women can even hope to have equal opportunity for some of the reasons we've all been discussing. So, we've got a long way to go, but God, what a great group of women and male allies we've got to get going with.
Thank you so much. And I'd like everyone online to join me in thanking this panel. It has been a wonderful discussion. I am sorry it's not 3 hours long, but it is very late at night here in Australia. But it has been incredible and just absolute credit to the work that all three of you do. You are absolutely inspiring, and I'm seeing those in the comments and the chat. Everyone just telling you what an important and inspiring conversation it was today. I'd like to also thank Smithsonian, who is hosting this webinar and have been an incredible supporter. Martine and Andrea, who I'm sure have struggled at times to keep up with us as we got passionate and engaged in the conversation. Thank you so much for the simultaneous translation. And thank you to the audience who have joined us right around the world. So many wonderful comments, so much commitment to everyone thinking about and listening to these stories today. That we keep working together. I love these messages of being connected, being networked, being supportive, because working together, we can make a difference. We can keep saving species one at a time in the oceans, on the land, in villages, wherever it is we work. We are all powerful. In every single day, we take decisions that make a difference. And we just have to remember that the change will come today, tomorrow, and the next day as we make a step forward. Thank you all, Dr. Amanda, Dr. Purnima, and Dr. Trang. It has been an absolute pleasure to spend the last hour with you. And I really hope we can have another conversation sometime soon. Thank you all and good night.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
It's been wonderful. Bye, Purnima. Bye, Jenny. Bye, Tran.